And welcome back, everyone, to episode 73 of the Sports Coverage Podcast. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined by the wonderful Tarik El-Bashir, who is a Capitals insider for Monumental Sports Network and the Rinkside reporter for NHL on TNT. Thank you, Mr. El-Bashir, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of stuff happened with the Capitals this season. Of course, they were involved with the Alex Ovechkin great chase, so it's going to be great to talk to you about that. But I'd love to talk with you a little bit about yourself first. So, of course, hockey is your specialty. The Washington Capitals are who you cover on a day-to-day basis. Was hockey always a sport that you kind of saw yourself specializing in? And if not, how have you kind of grown into that role?
Yeah, so I started out as a sports writer in newspapers. Worked for the New York Times in the late 1990s, and then came home to the Washington Post. I'm originally from the DMV. I live in Annapolis, Maryland now, and I grew up playing hockey in Maryland. Back when there were only 8 teams and a very small league. The sport has really exploded in this area over the past decade or so. A lot of that is attributable to Alex Ovechkin and just the Capitals' success in general. But yeah, I grew up playing the game, and I didn't really think sports journalism was going to be my pathway until my freshman year. I went to Howard University, and I got into the School of Communications because, quite frankly, it was the easiest school to get into with my grades. So went to School of C, and my intro to journalism class, a man named Mike Wilbon came to speak to my class. And he was a columnist at the Washington Post. Now, of course, now he's famous. He's on the ESPN,
Yeah, exactly.
and some TNT coverage. And he's everywhere now, and super famous. But he came and he spoke to my class and just regaled us with stories of covering NBA Finals and Super Bowls and Stanley Cup Finals and the Masters and Wimbledon. And I was like, oh my God, I love sports. And this dude gets paid to go and write about them. I'm not that great a writer, but I think I can figure that out. And so after the class, I went up and I talked to him, and he put me in contact with the sports editor at the Washington Post, who hired me twice in my career. And it started there. Took an internship with the New York Times right out of college. Kind of learned everything I needed to know about the business during those 4 years. Met my wife in New York. Came back to DC and. Didn't immediately take over the Capitals beat. It took a couple of years to get it. Like, the plan was always to do it, but there was another beat writer who had to move over to the football team, and so when that all happened, that was 2004, which of course was the year that Alex Ovechkin was drafted. So there was no hockey the next year because of a season-long lockout, but essentially I was in the right place at the right time. I showed up on day one of the OV era and just have ridden his coattails to the top ever since.
Yeah, I will say I think maybe I was about 10. And I saw that there was a sports broadcasting camp, which now I've done for 4 years now.
Nice.
And that was I know that I played like Little League for a while. Baseball is the sport that I love the most. And I just realized that that's not really going to be what I'm going to do with my life. So as you can see, I'm kind of starting to explore options of what can I do in sports and stuff like that. So
I would say you've gone beyond exploring options. You've already kind of taken a few big steps towards doing it, and that's great to see.
Yeah, thank you so much. So you mentioned that you worked with many different medias. You were a writer for a bit. Now you do some sideline reporting and things like that. So how have you kind of balanced those different skill sets to build your portfolio?
I tell people this all the time, and just in the past 10 days, I've spoken to 2 groups of sports media campers, one at Georgetown University, and then yesterday at my studio in downtown Washington. And I tell everyone the same thing. Number one, the more tools you have in your tool belt, the better chance you'll have of having a long career in this business. Be able to write a blog, be able to write an article, be grammatically correct in your posts on social media. Everything is based in writing. Even if you're on television, if you can write well, you can talk well, you can speak well, you're concise, you're precise with your language, and be able to get in front of a camera, be able to write, have a presence on social media. Don't be afraid if you're in a breaking news situation to pull out your iPhone and film something right then and there. The more things you can do, the longer you'll stay in this business. And I look around to the people who work with me at Monumental Sports Network, and a lot of us have backgrounds as sports writers, transitioned over into television, but we also are frequent guests on big podcasts, and we do sports talk radio interviews. And if need be, we can do a speaking engagement on behalf of the company, which I do quite frequently. So, I would say, circling back to where I started, Andrew, if you can write, you can do anything in this business. It begins with writing. And how do you become a good writer? Be a voracious reader. The more you read, the better writer you'll become. And if you can write, you can do anything.
Yeah, I did certainly a lot of reading to prepare for this today. I would say hockey isn't necessarily the sport that I gravitate to the most, but I really try to stay involved. I'm a Devils fan, New Jersey. That's really our only team here where we can support that with our state's name on it. So I try to be involved with that. But, doing a lot of research and what we'll talk about, some of the free agency and stuff has been quite fun this last week to kind of keep more of a closer eye on the NHL than I would have previously had. So I think that reading or either articles from you or from other impressive NHL reporters has been very interesting this week.
Great game, man. Get into it. I like baseball too. When I was your age, I was probably a much bigger fan. And then the Orioles just broke me. They were so bad for so long. And then they got good the last few years. And, went to playoff games, and now they're back to bad. So it's like, And I never really got into the Nationals, even though, they're right down the street from my studio. And in fact, I drove by the stadium yesterday for the first time in a long time. They're equally as bad. So I don't have a lot to cheer for here in DC, but hockey's the sport that I played baseball a little bit, but hockey's a sport that really really grabbed me and stoked my interest in sports and competitiveness and eventually sports media.
Yeah, that's awesome. So on to Alex Ovechkin. You mentioned you started covering him his first year in the league when he came to the Capitals in 2004.
First interview.
Yeah, and he broke that all-time scoring record just last season. Yeah, so that's actually going to be my second question about Ovechkin. But what's it been like to kind of cover him as he's grown into this star and now one of the greatest of all time?
The cool thing for me is just watching someone grow up. He was drafted at 18 years old. He didn't come over because of the lockout till he was about 20. Mm-hmm. So to watch this guy show up as and just kind of take the NHL by storm. I mean, he was just a beast. He was different than anything we'd ever seen before. He could score a goal. He could set up a goal. He could run you over. If you messed with him, he might punch you in the face. Like, he just did everything and was so ebullient and full of energy and life. And, I'll be honest, there were some times where I was a little worried. I was like, man, this guy lives so hard and so fast. But, you can tell he just loves life and loves the game. And he gave great quotes. And then he got older and he got wiser and he got married and he had kids. And just to watch this guy, weather the storms that we all go through as you get older. Sure, he did it with a lot of money in his pocket and a lot of fame. But he had some tough seasons. He had some 30-goal seasons where people were like, "What happened? Is Ovi over? Are the 50 and 60-goal seasons done?" He's had some failure. I mean, they won the Stanley Cup in 2018. That's really only their long playoff run in his 20 years, and so he hears that a little bit. Even though winning it is so hard and such a big accomplishment, he probably just goes, "Hey, I can't hear you. I got a Stanley Cup ring in my ear." But at the same time, I think when all's said and done, if he doesn't win another one before he retires, people are going to go, how come he didn't win 2 or 3 like Sidney Crosby or some of these other greats? And just to see him deal with criticism, fan criticism, media criticism, and just to overcome all of that, and then for it all to kind of culminate last year in just, I don't think people on the outside, and I'm not in the locker room, like when the coach is talking. I'm in there when it's open for the media, but I know him pretty well. And the pressure was immense. I mean, hockey, for the most part, you can walk around DC as a hockey player for the Capitals and you might get a quick wave or a honk, but it's not like Toronto or Montreal or someplace where, everyone's on top of you all the time. But that's how last year was for Alex. I mean, every national media outlet wanted a sit-down interview. Every time another team came in town, they wanted interviews. Like, it just everyone was asking, when are you going to do it? And then he broke his leg, and then missed 16 games, and everyone's like, oh, it's going to be the next year. There's no chance. And then he comes back, and he's just as good as he was at the start. And just to kind of watch him handle the pressure, um, was it was just a really cool story to tell. And I feel like I was the kind of the bookend in terms of telling the story on the start and he's got another year left and the end, right? I was in the first scrum when he was drafted in 2004 in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was the first reporter who did an interview with him after he scored 895. And you know it really kind of puts things into perspective to kind of see someone's entire career arc, and just also just the greatness of him as a player. It's really hard to put it into words. Ovi passing Gretzky is a lot like you know the football rushing title, right? It's the basketball points title. I mean, it's hockey, so it's the fourth sport,
Yeah.
of the North American sports, but it's every bit as hard as Hank passing the Babe, right? I mean, it's that big a deal, and to be there to cover it all, and I've never told him this, but I owe a lot of my career to his success, right? I mean, I got onto TNT's national broadcast because they saw me always talking to Ovi, and they knew that at some point soon he was going to break the record. So, I owe him a lot, and he's always been really good to me. And when it's all said and done, I'm going to take my credential from Long Island when he scored the goal, and I'm going to ask him to autograph it. I'm going to put that on my wall, and it's going to be the only time I've ever asked Ovi to sign anything for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that if I were in that situation, that would definitely be something I would do. But, watching hockey from afar this season, I was right along with some of the people that said, I don't know if he's going to do it this year.
Sure.
And then kind of as hashtag Great Chase starts coming up and the Capitals start kind of pushing that, and I'm starting to pay attention more and more, I'm like, this is actually going to happen this year. And I mean, I was watching that final game. That was probably the only non-Devils hockey game in the whole last year that I really sat down and watched those couple of games, the one in Long Island, especially, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that was just a big moment because Wayne Gretzky is someone, especially where I am, New York, New Jersey, everyone knows who Wayne Gretzky is, right?
Yeah.
And now you're seeing this guy, Alex Ovechkin, he's coming in, he's breaking that record. And I think it's a big moment for the sport,
Sure.
especially, but also, of course, now Washington has one of the greatest hockey players of all time, forever, cemented with that record.
Yeah, and I'm not sure anyone's ever going to pass him. I know we said that about Gretzky, and a little side note, I got to cover Gretzky at the end of his career. Like I said, I started at the New York Times. He was, of course, on the Rangers, so I got to cover Gretzky his last year on the Rangers. I covered his last game in Canada, in Ottawa, and I covered his last game ever at Madison Square Garden. So it was also cool because that was the beginning of my career, was seeing the end of Gretzky. And now to see Ovi pass him all these years later was something really special. But I don't know if anyone's ever gonna break this record. I look at Leon Draisaitl, I look at Austin Matthews, I look at Connor McDavid. There are some players that have an outside chance, but those guys are already 29, going on 30 years old.
Exactly, yeah.
They have to really floor it here and have some more 60 plus goal seasons. And I think Austin Matthews can do it, but also he gets banged up a lot.
Yeah.
He misses a lot of time. So my money is on Ovi holding this record forever. And you know what? He's going to play another season at least. So there's a decent chance he's going to end up with 930 goals before he heads back to Mother Russia.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the fact that he's still going to have that he's still in his prime form, that he can keep running away with this is just insane to me. And
yeah,
the fact that, like you said, he had his leg injury and he's gone through a lot in his career, and now he's still at this point in 2025, 2026, which I think is insane to say, considering it's 2004, like you mentioned, is when
he's still a 40 goal scorer.
And he's still doing that. And I just think that that's crazy. And I don't know if there's any other sport where there's longevity like that, because now pitchers in baseball are getting banged up a lot. Football is always been a sport, and basketball as well. So I don't really know where what other sport has a player like this?
Yeah, I would say, maybe like a LeBron.
Yeah.
It's probably the best comparison. I think Kareem Abdul-Jabbar played pretty late,
Mhm.
still pretty productive, but it's really rare. I mean, football. Tom Brady, I mean, he got to what, 40. I
Yeah.
mean, those are the guys I look at there. You're right. Baseball back when I was a kid, Tom Seaver and Nolan Ryan, those guys pitched into their late 30s and
Yeah.
40s. But that doesn't happen anymore because of how much torque they're putting on their arms now, and they're tearing their ECLs like way early. I mean, it's different than before, but and hockey's a different beast. I mean, people talk about football, and football is savage. It really ravages your body, but it's 17 times a year, and then you have this long off season. Hockey is this long season where you're going 30 miles an hour with blades on your feet hitting the wall, right? I mean, I don't think people know, outside of, people who are around the players every day, how much it takes to get through an NHL season.
Yeah. And I think that seeing some of the goalies when they're skating off the ice at the end and they're just perfectly fine after taking however many insane amount of shots they took, it's just kind of surreal to see that, especially in person. Then they go do an interview and they're just kind of a little bit out of breath, but they're doing fine. And it's just such a like weird thing because even in football they're sweating and they're out of breath, basketball in their post-game interviews and stuff, and then hockey player just comes off and they're all good and they're ready to move on to the next one.
Yeah, yeah. And goalies lose so much water weight during
Yeah.
all the gear. Most of them lose 5, 6, 7, 8 pounds. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Um, so I'd love to talk a little bit about free agency and specifically the Capitals.
Sure.
Um, they've, I will say that this year, and from what I've seen from who's re-signed where and stuff like that, that a lot of players are returning to their home teams, and we saw that.
100%.
Yeah, and we saw that early with the Capitals. Martin Fairbury, a huge 7-year contract. Jacob Chikrin also re-signed, so that's two big defensemen there. So how do you think that those two guys are going to kind of help lead this Capitals back line as we move into the future?
Yeah, I think Martin Farivari is still a young player who's got a lot of runway in front of him. Jacob Chikrin, I mean, he's a star. He was a star already when he got here, but he had a breakout season, right? He had 20 goals as a defenseman,
Yeah,
and that's such a important thing to have is some offense from the back end. But another key player that resigned during the season, and sorry, let me back up. So I feel like the Capitals really kind of had their free agency during the season
yeah,
because they kept the guys that they wanted to keep. Like you said, they re-signed Farivari, they re-signed Chikrin, they re-signed Logan Thompson, right? So they retained a lot of their key pieces. They re-signed Nick Dowd. So a lot of teams around the league did the same thing. They didn't want to risk letting their players hit the open market. The Capitals identified who they wanted, and they kept those guys. And I know you asked me before we started this about Nikolai Ehlers. That was a player that they targeted. I mean, they wanted his speed, they wanted his goal scoring. Ultimately, he chose Carolina. I mean, that's how free agency goes. Same money, same term. He wanted a little bit quieter and warmer weather, and that's the way it goes. So now the Caps have to look kind of internally for improvements. They've got some young players that are now going to have an opportunity to make the big club and show what they can do.
yeah. And I was going to talk about the draft as well. When I first reached out to you a couple of weeks ago, that was right after the draft had ended, and your first round pick, Lyndon Lakovic, this year he just signed his 3-year entry contract, but
Yep.
it's expected that he's not going to be with the Capitals this year, and he's
Yeah.
to develop a little bit more. Like, what do you think the Capitals are really going to be looking to see from him while he's on loan?
Yeah. So I would say the NHL draft, with the exception of the top 3, 4, 5 players, those guys rarely step right into the NHL. Most of them either go back to their junior hockey club or they go into the NCAA for a little bit more seasoning. It's a really hard league to step right into unless you're Alex Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby or a number 1 overall pick. Matthew Schaefer is going to step right into the New York Islanders lineup this year, but that he was the first overall. Lyndon Lakovic, he actually was just here. He was here over last week for the Capitals development camp, and I think some people will tell you he was the best player there. Those were basically players who've been drafted over the last 3 years by the Capitals. I think Lakovic really opened a lot of eyes. You know, he's listed at 6'4", he's probably 6'5". You can tell he's got a little swagger to him. He scored a lot of goals in that camp. I would say he's going to what the Capitals want to see from him. You know, he's the captain of his junior team, Moose Jaw, in the WHL. They want him to go back to Moose Jaw and be a great leader and put up even better numbers. And just like every 18-year-old who gets drafted, they've got to get a little bit stronger, especially guys who are drafted later, like Linden. You know, they probably want to see him get to 210, 215. Remember, you know, when you step into the NHL, the NHL doesn't care that you're 18 and still kind of scrawny. Like, these are grown men playing to feed their families. Like, they play with anger. Their arms look different. Like, they're craftier. They're stronger. They weigh a lot more. And so, you know, Linden is probably, even though he signed his contract, it'll just slide. It won't count next year. He won't get paid next year, and it won't count towards his 3 years. He's probably 2 years away from making his debut, maybe 3. I remember there's guys who were drafted in the first round the past couple of years who were in front of him, so by the Capitals. So, you know, he will be part of that group that kind of takes the baton from the Ovi era and kind of goes into the future. And he's going to be a very good player. I mean, I don't know about superstar, but he's going to be a very good player.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I think that as you kind of describe how that NHL development really works, it's kind of interesting where in baseball you have the minor league system, and
very similar to baseball.
In football you have nothing, which is interesting, and
right.
One G League team. But I think it's interesting that they're kind of claiming the rights to these players before they're even fully developed or they're ready to go. And I think with that being said, MLB and the NHL kind of those teams take the biggest gambles when they're really signing these players, because you're seeing them at Linden's 18 years old, and we'll see in 2 years, like you said, you're going to have to wait 2 years to see if he's really going to pan out to be the top prospect they want him to be. And I just think that that's a very interesting thing that NHL teams really have to look more deeply into than sports like NBA or something like that.
Absolutely. You're not drafting for need or what you are, unless you have the first, second, third, fourth pick. Like, then you're going, okay, well, we need a center. This guy over here can be our first line center next year. For the most part, you're just taking the best player available, because you can't let a better player end up getting taken 2 or 3 spots behind you. Because again, you're also not drafting for next year's roster. I always tell people, and I'm friends with some of the scouts around the league. We've covered the league as long as I have. You bump into the same people in airports and press boxes and hallways at the rink. And what baseball scouts do and what hockey scouts do is incredibly hard. Projecting where an 18-year-old is going to be when he's 21, 22, their motivations, what their body is going to look like. Do they still want to do this? You know, what's their, can they stay healthy? I mean, what's their mental capacity? Like how smart are they? Like, there's just so many things. You're drafting a kid, and you're, you know, it's not something to be taken lightly. I mean, first round draft picks, you have to hit on your first round draft picks if you're going to be a healthy franchise. You cannot draft players and whether you're drafting first or drafting 27th, like Lakovic, that dude has to be on your roster or you failed as an organization. But I still think only like 60% of them actually become full-time, like play more than 200 games. So someone told me a long time ago, first rounders, you got to hit on them. Second rounders, they should play. Third rounders, you're hopeful. Everyone else, the kid's 18. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just very interesting. Like, I think the Devils' best example of that is with Luke Hughes, who went back to college. He played, and then he came into the league, and he's immediately in there as our like second line defenseman or something like that.
Good player.
Which is, I just think that that's such a ridiculous way to go about your career. You're drafted, and then you're just away from the team for so long, and then you come back, and it's just a whole new world.
Fact check me on this, but I feel like his debut came against the Capitals.
It might have been. And
I think he scored the overtime winner. I remember going, "Oh my god!" Or it was one of his first games.
It was his debut was the Sabres, but I do remember that game because that
was a game like 3 or 4 of his career. He had not been in the league very long.
Yeah, it was something like that, and Yeah,
And it might
yeah,
have been from the pass, might have been from Jack, if
I,
I remember correctly. It was
yeah.
kind of
It
crazy.
was 2 days after, and it was
Yeah,
assisted by Jack,
yeah, yeah,
which is kind
yeah,
of the most fairy tale way you could go about getting your
yeah,
first goal. It's an OT from your brother in like
yeah,
your second game or something against the top.
yeah. Yeah, I remember sitting there with some other Capitals people, and we all kind of looked at each other like, "We're gonna be facing these two dudes, these two brothers, for the next 12 years." Jesus Christ!
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking the same here. How many more years are we gonna have to face Alex Ovechkin every time we play the Capitals, which I just think is still ridiculous. So yeah, and I want to kind of leave with this. You mentioned and I mentioned how the market, there's not a lot going on now, especially as we're moving. Now we're just months away um, from the start of the next NHL season, and a lot of players have chosen to re-sign. So, what's really the next logical steps for the Capitals? Is it a trade? Is it kind of
Yeah,
locking down some more of these younger guys?
yeah. I think they've got like $4.2 million in cap space, so they've got space. They always have some irons in the fire. Like there's always someone that they've got their eyes on. They've had a couple of discussions about a trade. There's always something going on. They need a scoring winger or would like one. They've got some youngsters that are ready to punch through, but the Caps window is open again. So like it's a fine line. I just talked to the general manager about this the other day. It's a fine line between going, all right, well, we were the Eastern Conference champions last year. We fell short in the playoffs. Do we give Ivan Miroshnichenko at 21 years old, our former first round, do we trust him to be that guy? Or do we go get a 29-year-old that we already know has done it for 8 years and tell Ivan, wait another year or two? Like, it's always kind of like when you have guys that you're not really sure if they can do it because they haven't done it over a sustained amount of time. But I think the Capitals, their plan right now, if they don't pull off a trade, then I think they're always looking for trades. They're always looking to make the team better. If they don't, they're going to go into next season having kept the Eastern Conference championship roster the same. Ryan Leonard, their first round draft pick from a few years ago, came in at the end of the season. Only played a handful of games. Played in the playoffs, but only played it. That's a free agent ad in my opinion. Like he's going to be a very good player. I think he's like 19 or 20 years old. Like he wasn't here at the start of last year. He's going to be there at the start of this year. That's your third line right wing, maybe even second line. Then you need Hendrix Lapierre, Ivan Miroshnichenko to step up and be that third line left wing. Sonny Milano missed all of last year except for 3 games with an upper body injury. He's feeling good. We think he might be able to play again. When he's healthy, he's a very good player. So there's going to be a lot of competition there. And then because they have cap space, they'll go into the season, I think, if they don't pull off a surprise trade here, and give those guys all a chance. And if you get to Thanksgiving and they aren't doing it, then you make a trade. If you think you can still kind of doggy paddle your way around for a few more months, maybe you wait until the deadline and then there's a chance to go get a really good player. I'll give you a quick example. The Florida Panthers won their second straight Stanley Cup. They played for the Stanley Cup 3 times in a row. Two of their most impactful players last year, Brad Marchand and Seth Jones, weren't on the team at the start of the year.
Yeah.
They were added through the year. This is a copycat league. Every GM saw that. Hey, we don't have to have our team together on day one. We have to have our team together on day one of the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so I think the Caps want to, again, unless they make a surprise trade and they always have something going, but if it doesn't happen, they're going to keep that $4.2 million in their back pocket, knowing they can spend that throughout the year to improve their team.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Mr. El-Bashir, for joining me today. It's truly an honor to talk with you. I love talking hockey when I can. I love getting more into it through the research I did, like I mentioned earlier. So this is awesome. Thank you.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Great conversation.
Thank you. Well, that's pretty much going to do it for episode 73 of the Sports Coverage Podcast. My name is Andrew, and Vince will be back next week. Like and subscribe on YouTube, and go follow us for all the clips and stuff over on the Instagram. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.